Hey everyone, got a new salmon fly tying video for you here, and I'm doing a voiceover again. This is only the second time I've done this, so bear with me if you hear any weird stuff. I'm just trying to figure out the process. This is a green Highlander, Kelson version. This is probably the easiest one of the green Highlanders. There's the hardest one's probably the price tannet version, I would assume. But maybe one day I'll be able to put that on YouTube. For now, it's going to be this one. Now, I have to say, a lot of this is easy. I would say the wing is probably more along the easier side, and the body is pretty easy because it's mostly dubbing, which hides a lot. And now looking back on it, maybe I should have did my first blind eye tying video with this pattern because it's dubbing. And I would say that if you're going to tie a blind eye, the first one you should do is dubbing body, because it hides that the gut really well. But I got it on this Sprite 2.0, and I really like these hooks. They're really cheap. Good way to get into tying salmon flies. As far as the one hard part about this fly, I would say it's the head area, because you don't have all that stuff that you can hide a lot. There's no cheeks, there's no eyes, there's no herl. You gotta kind of be a little smooth. You can't really hide any imperfections up there. All right, so getting started here. It's twist in the back. It's silver twist. Now I don't have silver twist this size, so I just got some extra small ultra wire here, and I'm going to use a dubbing tool and just kind of twist it up. Honestly, this is kind of just I didn't need to do this, but I did it anyway, just to see. I've never done it before, just to see how it would look. And unless you look at this thing with a microscope, there's no real way to tell that it's a twist. Now, if I used maybe a small, maybe you could tell, but then it would be too big. And I'm not sure. Maybe twist has 3 strands in it. So, I don't know. Maybe I could have somehow done 3 strands, but honestly, if you don't have twist, you could just use a small wire, and I think you'd be probably fine. But I threw this in there. And what is that? That's 4 or 5 turns. And I started right in between the point and the barb, closer to the barb. And take all those turns back. Now I put those turns in there just to hold the cut ends, because I'm going to tie those cut ends in, because I'm going to make up for the bend, like you've probably seen in other videos. Now I'm tying this off, and now I'm actually just going to untwist it, and I laid it down flat. So this is yellow floss. This is 4-strand floss. We only need 1. Just going to go up a little bit, probably to right around the point or so. We'll put the floss in, tie it back, and then come forward. Sure you saw, but this is Danville. There's a lot of different flosses out there. Right? Some silk floss, rayon acetate. Lagerton makes some. There's old ones too. Get whatever you can afford. I like this fly a lot. It's one of the few. It's one of the few green salmon flies. Really, like, when you look at it, it's like, this is green. I mean, obviously it's called a green Highlander, so if it just had like one little thing of green, it would kind of be stupid. But I mean, this thing is really green. It's the only one I really know of that's this green. I don't know if you can think of another one. Let me know, because I like doing something with I mean, if you look at the colors of salmon flies, a lot of them are very, very similar. There's a lot of natural browns and grays and black and stuff, and then you got your colors, which is usually yellow, orange, red, blue. It's kind of pretty much it. But throwing this green in there, I like this. Maybe that's why this is such a just a famous fly. Because it's different as far as colors are concerned. And my friend John was saying it was like this version of the Green Highlander. He says that you either like love it or you hate it, and that is because there's no eyes, there's no cheeks. I wouldn't say it's plain because it's a salmon fly, but when you look at the price tannet version, I mean, this thing is This thing's like a wet fly compared to Price Tannen. Price Tannen is he took a whole bunch of flies and just really did a number on them. And I think there must be 10 more steps in his version of this fly. It's beautiful. But it's not even really the same fly. It just has the same name, and it's got some green in it. Putting on the tail now. I usually use two crests, and I'm putting them on one at a time here. Hey, if you saw, I don't know, I sometimes I wet my fingers just a little bit and run it through this crest just to keep all the fibers together, and it looks kind of like very straight right now. I mean, halfway through the video, you probably see it dries and opens up very quickly. And also, you could once you get it on there tight and good, you could run your fingers through it and you'll take the moisture right off. It doesn't like soak in or anything like that, but it does keep all the fibers together so that when you tie it on, the fibers don't go all over the place. So just a good little trick. So you can see the fibers all over the place right there, and then I just licked my fingers and ran them through it, and now it's going to go on a lot easier. See, if I would have tried to tie it on before, it would have been a mess. Now, here's another thing. I'm cutting off a lot of this stem because it can get in the way when you're putting on that second crest. The first one goes on easy, but the second one can really get screwed up because, well, the second one doesn't get screwed up. You try and put the second one on and your fingers touch the first one. And if you saw, I only had one turn of thread holding that first one on there. So that's all right there. So there's only a few turns there, but then I'm going to throw a little bit of super glue and tie it in pretty good. Also protects it unraveling when you cut the tail with the razor blade. On top of this tail is teal, and the way I do it, I don't know. Some people, I guess, everybody has their own opinion. I guess I use a feather, and I just use the tip of the feather, and I put it in so that the curve is on the inside. So it's like two curves meeting. I'm cutting this off with a razor blade right now. Let's see that there's just the tip. I just cut the tip out, and you see how the curve is on the inside. That's how I do it. Some people put it so that it meets the other, meets the crest, but I'm like doing like opposing, I guess, in a way. I don't know if there is a correct way or not. Seems to be okay. You see that tail is flaring out now a bunch. Doesn't take long for it to dry. I'm putting some black marker on this thread just to cover up a little bit of this area, so when I put the hurl on, the white thread is not as noticeable. Obviously I could use black thread from the beginning, but I don't really like to do that. Here's that mini hurl. You want to use a hurl that's got small fibers. Now, this is kind of important. If you remember, I used a razor blade to cut the tail, and those razor blades, they can cut so close, and that's what's great about them. The problem is sometimes they cut so close that in this case, you don't have the enough surface area to do the next step, which is like one of the next steps is put this hurl on. So now I have to kind of build up this area. You see, I'm building up the area because I want to put a few turns in there, and it was slipping. And you can even see it's still kind of on a little bit of a slope there. Which causes it to slip one more time. And then it pops out of my fingers. It's good to remember that sometimes even with that razor blade, you might not want to cut it so close. So that's a good size right there. And you can see, you can just catch a little, if you zoom in, I'm not sure what kind of screen you're looking at, but if you can just see a little bit of the white. But I mean, I record so close. I think it's important to record pretty close. I will say that sometimes when you get too close, you can't really take in the fly. You can see the detail of it, but you can't really take in the entire fly and how all the materials work together. I don't know if this is too close or not, but I might try and, this is just me comparing one I already tied to it and make sure I'm in the right spot. I might try and move back just a hair on one of the next ones, just so you can get just a better feel for how the fly works together. I think close up on the body is good, but once you get the wing on and everything, it may make more sense to just go back a hair. Now I'm using some, this is just a Mylar tinsel. I use a lot of, if I'm tying a lot of something, a lot of flies, like I've tied a bunch of these, I just try and use Mylar. If I want to tie something for a frame or something like that, I'll use some real tinsel. But Mylar is, definitely want to show you what it looks like with Mylar because it's cheap, and if you're just starting out, it's a good idea to just pick up some Mylar. This one happens to be gold and silver, so you got to make sure that you have the gold facing you when you put it on. Now I'm just making sure it's going to turn on good. It's also a good idea. I think I'm going back here a little bit. You kind of want that tinsel to be closer to the bottom. I don't know what you want to call it. Maybe like a 430 position. If you're looking from the back of the hook, let's say that would be like a 435 position, so that when you make that first turn, you don't see the crease in it as you turn it to come up. And I'm kind of just building this up just a little bit. And it's not long enough I have a little spring holder on the back of the vise, but it's not long enough, so I just tucked it into the jaws. You see that? It goes right in between the jaws. If you don't have a spring holder, that's a good little trick. Just slide it right into the jaws. Back to the yellow floss. And again, we're going to go down and back up. This one should, if you can, and if you can, it's not a big deal, but if you can, you want to make this part just have a little bit of a taper to bigger, obviously, as you get closer to the eye. And the only reason you do that is just so it works with the fur that you're going to put on after this. So just a hair of a taper would be nice. You also want to wiggle that floss a bit to flatten it. In certain cases, you got to look at each turn, and sometimes you want to overlap the turn previous, or sometimes you don't. Like towards the butt there, I was really trying to stretch it out and space out the turns because I wanted it to be a little bit thinner back there. And then as I got forward, I tried to overlap it a little bit. But yeah, if you like wiggle your hand just back and forth a little bit, you'll see it you'll see it flatten out. Getting a body hackle ready now, and I know it was only up for a second or two, but I showed you that previous fly I did. I was just lining it up, but if you notice, that hackle was a little bit long on that one, and that's because when I measured out this body hackle, I did it on the bare shank and not considering what I would be wrapping it over in the future. Meaning I took the hackle and I wrapped it around, kind of like you do with a dry fly. And I said, okay, yeah, this hackle point meets the. Remember this bag right there? See that? This hackle meets the point, and that works for me. But what I didn't think about was is that I wasn't wrapping this onto the shank. I was wrapping it onto seal's fur, which is a lot bigger. So when you do that, the those tips of the hackle end up going a lot lower. So you have to compensate for that. If you're wrapping it around the shank to measure it, which you have to because you're putting it on now, if you see, you have to remember, okay, but when I do wrap it, the shank's not going to be this size, it's going to be bigger. So I have to pick a fiber that's a lot shorter than where I want it to be once I wrap it. That's what I did here. If you look, you can see how much shorter it is. Look at the tips of that hackle right there. It just goes to the middle of the bend of the hook. Now I'm getting some seal's fur. And so when you look up this color, you should look up like green Highlander. Like if you wanted to buy seal's fur for this fly, you'd look up green Highlander seal's fur, or green Highlander dubbing, or something like SLF is a good sub for seal's fur. And even the strung hackle, you look up green Highlander. And even though it's not dyed by the same person, it's probably not dyed even in the same year when you get this stuff, you should be able to look through the patch of strung hackle to find a shade of green Highlander that matches your dubbing. Usually what ends up happening is the patch of strung hackle is like darker on the outside because that's the side that has the best contact with the dye. And if you dig through it and you go more towards the center, some of the smaller ones, that's where you'll find a lighter one, a lighter colored one. And what I usually do is I go through a patch and I pick out the smaller ones and I put it into its own little bag, and then I put it into that bag I just showed you on the screen before that I told you to remember about. That is essentially all small strung hackle that I pulled out of the big patches. And I just try and keep them organized because when I want to use a body hackle, I don't want to have to go through a patch every single time. It's kind of a real pain, and it's a mess too. Now I got that dubbing on, and it's hard to tell now, but it's got a little bit of a taper. You'll see it once I pull the mylar up. Just tying it off. Now one thing I'll say here also is that if you put too much, if you make that taper too big and the front has a ton of dubbing, you're going to have a problem with the wing. So it really all depends on what you like. If you like a really big taper into a big clump of dubbing, you got to remember actually to taper it back down, maybe 3/16 away from where you're going to tie the wing in, so that the wing sits flush there with the body. If the wing is propped up against something that's really steep, it won't sit flat. Now I'm bringing this mylar up. It's one turn onto the yellow floss, which means you got to move the hackle out of the way, and then the next turn is onto the seal's fur. So five turns total, and that 6th turn is just in front. You can see a little better now that the taper in the seal's fur. Now I'm moving this front one up just a hair with my nail, just to make the space a little bit more. If you put the tinsel on a little too loose, it can shift on you, but if you put it too tight, it kind of segments the body kind of ugly. So you have to weigh your options there. You want to put it on tight enough where it doesn't move, but loose enough so it doesn't make the body ugly. Now I'm bringing this hackle up, and one thing you'll see here, I mean, I guess I wouldn't call this a mistake, but if I could go back right now, I would change it. Essentially, what I did here is that when I brought that second turn of Mylar up, I didn't get close enough to the body hackle. And that meant that when I did that first turn of body hackle, I couldn't get on to the Mylar like I did in all the other turns. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but if I could go back, I would make the first turn of Mylar a little bit closer to the butt, and then that second turn right up against the hackle. It's possible even on my side it is up against the hackle. It's just I couldn't get the hackle to turn and follow it. I'm not completely sure. Now, when I just made it with this hackle, just made it. And if you don't make it, if you can't really get a good turn or a turn and a half or 2 turns up at front, just tie it off and tie a new hackle on. It's not a big deal. You saw how sparse that hackle was. Once you double it over, it looks okay. And this is a good little trick. You have to be very gentle, but if you rub just a little bit of the seal spar out, it kind of blends into the hackle and makes it look a little bit fuller. It also helps to bring down the hackle a little bit. Now you can see that length there. That's pretty decent. The front one is just a smidge past the point, and you can really only tell because I'm zoomed in with like a telescope here to see it. Now we're getting the throat ready. You can do it one or two ways. You can pull the fibers off and do a pinch and loop underneath, or you can wrap. It's really up to you. Now if you wrap, I would highly suggest you do it the way I'm going to show you right here. And that's you make sure that first turn is actually just stem. So right now I'm trying to figure out where that first turn is going to be, because in reality you want as many fibers on the bottom as possible. So I'm sort of I'm keeping the thread tight and I'm pulling it out just a little bit. And what that means is that when the first turn on top is stem, you avoid some of the fibers being on top that you have to pull down. And you can see just a little bit of the stem there. When I make that turn, the fibers are going to start more on the, I don't know what you want, 9 o'clock or something, or 8 o'clock when you're looking from the back of the hook. That'll just make it easier for you to bring the fibers down when you're done. Now I'm doubling it over, and you can double it over when you don't have any steps after. Like the green hackle, the Green Highlander hackle, I had to double before I put it in, because you don't want to break it. Thinking about another turn. Thinking about what it's going to look like when I do it, but I don't need it. Now we'll tie this off and try and bring as many of those fibers down to the bottom as possible. Now, I bring everything down, and I do kind of like a couple of turns to catch it in, if you saw that, and then it keeps it there. And I'd say that length is pretty good, just past the hook point a hair. Now we're going to switch to black. This is Giorgio Benici 12-0. But still very strong. You see, it took 2 pulls to break that off. Now, I'm going to start the wing now. What I do is when I get a patch of this tippet off a golden pheasant, I go through the whole thing, and I take the bigger ones and I put them into a left and right packages, because most of the time the big ones are for a wing, and that requires a left and right. This is just a little bit easier. Once you're taking it apart the first time, put it in little bags, get your left and rights set up. so that you can just go in and grab them. Try and keep them the same size when you put them in those bags, and keep them together. Just make life a lot easier for you. Now I lined it up, just went through them, and it was pretty easy to do because I had them all in the right bags there. And you can see now, if you look at that dubbing, it's got a little bit of a taper down, and that's going to allow the wing to sit a little bit better. Once I get them all lined up in the right size, I cut the stems off so that there's no waste. And I do that because the longer the stems are, the more they curve. And if they curve so much that the stems overlap each other right at the tie-in point, you'll never get the tippets to lay correctly. And it works the same way with the Carrie Stevens wing. You gotta cut them off to where there's no waste, and then the stems will sit right next to each other, and then they'll sit flat. And that's the best way to do it. Trust me on that. And I just tied this in, and it's looking pretty good. Right to the end of that teal. See that? Right to the end of the teal. Now this is me creating the wing. Now this actually took place prior to me tying the fly. I always make the wing before I start tying the fly. It's just one of the things I do. I feel like it's just easier for me mentally to make the wing. And then when I get to that part in the fly, I can just grab it and put it on, and I don't have to just slow down and start tying a wing. This is Green Highlander Goose Shoulder. There's 3 different types of dyed material you can use for a wing in a salmon fly. Is goose shoulder, turkey, swan. Swan's like the hardest to get. Turkey is the longest, and I would say it's probably the easiest to work with, but it is also expensive. Then goose shoulder is short, still works together, but it's good and it's cheap. That was turkey right there, and this is Corey Bustard. See how I split it off, and then I hold it with my hand, so I know exactly where the end is, and then I clip it off. I make sure I keep it separated when I cut it. There's no point in cutting into it not really knowing where you're cutting to. Last piece I'm making here is Florican, and it's supposed to be golden pheasant, but I hate golden pheasant. It's the worst. And Florican is very easy to work with, and it's small little slips. It can look like golden pheasant pretty well. Now I have to say, in the Silver Doctor video, there was a little bit of a controversy about what the name of this stuff is called. It is definitely Florican. Here's a Feathers MC screenshot, and it's Florican Bustard. It's in the Bustard family, and it's a well-known salmon fly material. It's not in a lot of flies, but it's definitely called Florican. That's the name of it. And someone happened to just say it's not Florican, and then somebody replied to him, and this is in the comment section, and an argument ensued, and it was kind of ugly, and I just deleted it because I really just don't. I just don't really need like rudeness in the comments, especially if you're wrong. If you're right, hey, okay, but if you're wrong, you need to go away. So here's that Florican. I'm putting it right on. Florican, expensive, but easy to work with, and they're really long too. And if I'm going to use something as a sub, I like a natural sub, and this is also a natural rare sub, which is always nice. I'm getting a piece of golden pheasant so that you could see that very close. Now the last part here is the goose shoulder. So I did at the bottom, I did turkey. Then the next one up is the Corey Bustard, and then the Florican Bustard, and then the goose shoulder. You just gotta be gentle with it, and they should marry, as long as you're not using golden pheasant. But they should marry up. You just gotta be gentle. Just just keep fiddling with it, tap it, and then hopefully. And once they do marry, it is actually very strong, which is kind of interesting. It's pretty strong. Now I just made that one side for you, but the two sides took me 15 minutes, and that's from start to finish, 15 minutes, and it it's not that hard to do. Now I put the two wings together, and I I slip the tippet in the center there. Some people like to fold it over. I don't know. I like to slip it in, and I'm just lining it up. I want it to go obviously past the tippet, but not past the crest. Kind of like the 3/4 point. Making sure that closer one is low enough. Now I'm putting a little bit of saliva at the tie-in point. Taking my other fingers away just so you could see what happens here. Ideally, I think you want to keep your fingers on it. And I did one turn, and then I get that next half and I pull up. Sometimes I pull down, sometimes I pull up. It really is a case-by-case basis. But one thing is for sure, though, is once you get that second turn in or a third turn, you don't want to let go with your left hand, and you want to bring the butts onto the top. That's really important. Twist those butts. Before you get too many turns in, twist the butts so that they're sort of in the center of the eye. And that'll get your wing on top. And then once your wing is on top, even if it looks a little weird like it does right now, as long as the wing is on top and in the center, you'll be able to fiddle with it to make it work. If it's not in the center, don't tie it off. Now I'm using a razor blade to cut the butts off. Get yourself a box of razor blades. I'm telling you, it's really important to use a razor blade on the head here. Now, not seen, I did put some more turns in, and I actually put a little bit of super glue too on the thread, and when I put it in, because just in case I do cut the thread here, it doesn't unravel on me. That's a good little trick, because you want to get it close. This is bronze mallard, and this piece is too big for sure, and I'm noticing that right now. So I took it down a hair. You know, ideally the first two parts of the top wing it should cover, and it should kind of go towards that first bar. First bar, maybe a hair shorter than that, I think is okay. Just basically do what looks good. Remember, you can always go back here because, you got really the hard part done. Try and get this right, essentially. And this looks a little low, but it's very easy to pull around. As long as you have those butts in the center of the eye, you'll be able to pull them around. The butts being in the center of the eye makes it so the bronze mallard lays flat on the wing. I'm holding the bronze mallard too right now when I clip it. If you don't hold it and you try and clip it, you could very easily move it. Now I'm bringing it back up for you with a bobkin. You just got to be gentle. Those fibers, they don't marry like turkey, so if you screw them up, they should go back together, but it can be a real pain to get them to go back together. Just be gentle with it, and that's pretty okay right there. Now I'm doing the other side, making sure it's aligned. Look at it from the top to see if the tips are aligned. Doing a pinch and loop. Doing it real gentle too. Now I want you to see what happens with these butts here. Right there. You see how they're on the side? Without a doubt, this will not look right. So just like the wing, before you get it tied off too good, take those butt ends like I'm doing here and bring them to the top and put them in the center of the eye. And that will make the bronze mallard lay flat. If I would have taken my hands off right there, without a doubt, it would have been screwed up. Putting a few more turns in. making it perfect. Now I want you to remember that turn right there. That particular turn right there. You see how it's caught on the throat? Well, I don't realize that. And I'm not going to realize it till the end. It's one turn of 12-0 when you're this close you can really see it. It sticks out like a sore thumb, but when you're tying, you never see it. Just one little turn like that, you just never see it until I start inspecting it at the end. Fortunately, it's easy to fix. But it looks like a total mistake, or at least right to me right now. When I'm editing it, it looks like a total mistake. Now we're in the home stretch. I'm getting the crest ready. I'm running my nail across the outside of the curve to straighten it. And you really got to be directly in line. I got two there, by the way. Sometimes you can do two together if they basically they have the same curve. You can work with them together. But I'm just running my nail over and over through the back. Your nail has to be perfectly in line with that curve though to do this. Over and over until you get the shape that you want. It can take a while, but say that's right about there. That looks like it. And I stripped off the fibers near the end, and I put a little crease in it. You see that crease? And it's still not right, but I'm getting there. That crease is important because you need to get the part that I'm holding right now in my hand, you need to get that away from the eye. One of the biggest problems with putting this stuff on is when it hits the eye. And you can also slide it into the eye of the hook. You can do that too. That works. If you don't do that, you really got to put a real severe crease in it. It also helps you with like a tying point where you say, okay, I gotta tie at this crease. Helps a little bit. Keeps the thread from slipping sometimes too. Now, once I get them right, you gotta really put them on separately. Right now, I'm still laying them out. Sometimes you can put them on together, but separately is probably the best move. You can see that corner I put in it. And another thing I'll say is that my right hand right now way too far away, and you can when you're that far away, it looks like I'm having withdrawals or something. It's shaking so much because your hand is so far away. When you put it close, you can rest your fingers on the eye. You see that, and then it becomes a lot more steady. So get it real close. Get your fingers as close as possible and put them on the eye. Hold this thread tight. And a nice new razor blade. And just gently touch it. See how easy that popped off? I can tell you I was not putting any pressure on that. A new razor blade. Two toppings. That's what you want. Two toppings. Sometimes three, but I would say rarely ever one. Even rarer than you use one in the tail, for sure. Look at that severe crease bend I put in there. I'm also, I guess this is something I should point out too, is I'm holding it with my bobbin hand, and I'm using my opposite hand to put that turn in. And the reason I'm doing that is because I have to hold the eye with my right hand to keep it steady and in the right spot. Once you get those two turns in, you can let it go, as long as the bobbin's not shaking too much. Holding the thread here. I'm pinching the whole thing right there and clipping it off. Now the last part here. This is horns. This is blue and yellow macaw. You want to try and get yourself a tail, center tail. But the one on either side of the center tail works as well, especially if you're not doing a gigantic fly. If you're doing like a 6-0 fly, you need that center tail. But a left and a right, sometimes even just a left or just a right would work. When you have just a left or just a right, one side of it is short and one side of it is kind of long. And if you're doing small flies, it works out. This happens to be just a left. Is it just a left or just a right? I'm not sure. But it's a short side and a long side. You see how now I have that one on that side is kind of long? This one worked out. And this is a 2-0. So the center tail is important for big flies, but it's not necessary. And these things can be tough to work with, these horns. They're shaped like a T, and the yellow part, which is the inside, which is what you want to be on the inside, you kind of want the blue to be on the outside. That's the part that's going into the wing, and that always causes it to twist. So you want to mash the hell out of it until it lays flat for you. I even sometimes take a razor blade and cut some of it off. And they don't have to go too long. You see how I have it right past the tippet and sticking up out? That's how I like it. I don't really have it like some people like to have it sticking all the way out the back. Not really into that. But I mean, you just do whatever you like. This is what I like. Coming out on an angle and just sticking out, short of the end of the fly. Now I'm kind of just making it look nice so that I could show it to you. Getting that bronze mallet. I tell you, those horns, they will stick to everything. And that's just the way it is. They just stick to everything. And they can really disrupt things. But now it's also your hand from tying things on will screw things up. So that's it. Just taking it off and looking at it. Seems sort of straight. Looking at your side now, making sure that tippet is opened up and laying a little bit flat. Yeah, so that's my side. Looks like there's a little super glue there on the throat, but I find it when I'm going over everything and just pull it right off. That's your side. You know, this is about 10 minutes later. Oh, there's that thread. Now I'm like, holy moly, what is this right here? I gotta fix this. And that started, I would say it started maybe like a 10-minute process of I had to put it back in the vise of trying to get that thread off. And I didn't want to, I didn't want to cut the throat, obviously, and I didn't want to unravel the thing. So taking one little turn of thread out, a little nerve-wracking, but thankfully I just took my time and a nice sharp pointy pair of scissors, and I got that piece out of there without damaging the throat or the head, really. I was pretty happy about that. Now I'm just going to throw a little extra super glue on there just in case. Use head cement super glue. I don't think it makes a difference. I don't really like those big bright crazy head cemented heads. It just adds bulk to it as well. I mean, if I got a tiny head, okay, maybe I'll put it on there, but I usually just make sure it's sealed up and that I'm good with it. And you can see, no cheeks, no eyes. You really have to make that tie-in point right there with all that stuff. Pretty neat. And that's it. Green Highlander. Kelson recipe. Looks alright. Alright, thanks.